Welcome to IVF This, episode 94, Greatest Hits Vol.1, Managing Uncertainty. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. After 10 years of primary and secondary infertility due to both male and female factor infertility, I am now the mother to 3 beautiful miracles. I am married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you how to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, 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 my beautiful friends. I hope you are all doing so well today. I am reaching back into the archives for today's episode. One of the most common things that I get asked about and that I coach on is around managing your emotions during like the 2-week wait, or really when you're waiting for anything from your clinic, or as time is passing or anything like that. That uncertainty that so many of us experience. And I released this episode almost a couple of years ago now. And since we're getting close to 100 episodes, which is insane for me to think about, I wanted to kind of bring this back to the surface, because once you get so far along into a podcast, sometimes you forget those earlier episodes. And I think based on kind of the feedback that I've been hearing from a lot of clients, a lot of potential clients, and a lot of people in our community, this issue is still really ever present and still causing a lot of dysregulation, a lot of grief, a lot of pain, a lot of frustration and things like that. So today we're re-releasing the information that I shared with you guys 2 years ago on managing uncertainty, what that looks like, why uncertainty feels so terrible, and all of that. So I hope you enjoy it, and I will talk to you guys next time. Hello, 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 my beautiful friends. I'm so happy to be talking with you all today, especially about uncertainty. One, because it is one of the primary things that I talk to my people about. I mean, hello, uncertainty is kind of a hallmark of infertility and fertility treatments. And 2, because it's very topical for me. If you've been following along for the last few weeks, you'll know that I have a transfer coming up and I'm in the middle of all kinds of uncertainty. This is our last transfer, our last embryo for our last cycle of IVF. Before we went into the cycle, my husband and I really spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about and coming to terms with this being our last cycle. I joke that it's kind of our fire sale cycle. Everything must go. I just turned 37 and Hubs will be 40 in just a few months. And this was like a promise to ourselves and our family that we would do one more round. And if it was successful, then amazing. And if not, we're already in love with our lives and our family, and we feel very at peace with that. Now, all that to say that even when we feel at peace, we still experience fear and anxiety that is often associated with uncertainty. I talk a lot about this, but there is like really specific finality to IVF, right? It's very binary. Either you react to the meds or you don't. You either have eggs to retrieve or you don't. Either those eggs are mature or they're not. Either those eggs fertilize or they don't. Either those fertilized eggs develop to blasts or they don't. They're either chromosomally normal or they're not. Either there's implantation or there's not. And I think it's that sense of finality that really feeds the discomfort of uncertainty. The trick about anxiety is that one of the things that the human brain likes least, and yet probably the most prevalent and reliable thing that is in this world, is uncertainty. You know the saying that one thing we can be certain of is that we cannot be certain of anything? We are confronted with uncertainty literally every moment of our lives. Everything outside of us is uncertain and not subject to our control. And as many of you have experienced, even things inside of us are uncertain and not subject to our control. It is in the fabric of every part and every moment of our lives, and yet our brains despise uncertainty. You would think that these two could get along, brain and uncertainty, just from the sheer amount of reps they have working together. But alas, here we are. So we're going to talk about what it is, why our brains hate it, and how we can manage it. Let's level set from the jump that we cannot avoid uncertainty. I know all of us feel like control freaks, myself is absolutely included in that. Think that if we can avoid it, if we can control things, we go through these super elaborate mental gymnastics to try to avoid uncertainty. We pretend it doesn't exist, or we try to control things even though almost all of the things that we try to control can never be controlled. So for me, in preparation for our transfer, I find myself trying to control the people. My husband, what he's doing, how he's responding to things, trying to control my kiddos, and finding myself getting super frustrated when the people don't cooperate because they're, people. So I started noticing that I was getting a touch controlling, and so I started doing some work around that. And what I uncovered was that I was feeling uncertain about our upcoming transfer. And because our brains hate uncertainty, I was trying to create control in the face of uncertainty. Now, this was a very unconscious thing, right? Like most of us do. I wasn't consciously thinking, wow, I feel really out of control with this upcoming cycle. So I'm going to hyper focus on the behaviors of the people around me so that they will behave in a way that I want them to so that I can feel better. Unless you're some sort of, android or something, most of us cannot narrate our thoughts and feelings and actions like that. But when I sat down and did some paper thinking, that was the think, feel, do cycle I identified. I often compare the IVF process and building a business because they both kind of require us to be committed to believing in the possibility of the goal. Not necessarily complete commitment to the belief that it will happen, but certainly belief in it's possible. When you first start a business, you agonize over every potential client. Like just in IVF, you agonize over every potential scenario. Every data point is make or break. Every test, every wait, it's excruciating. When you first start a business or IVF, in a lot of ways, it can be a real roller coaster of emotions if you have an unmanaged mind. This was absolutely me during our first few years of infertility and during our first round. I had just been introduced to coaching a few months before we started, and I was just starting to learn about the things and the frameworks that I teach you all now, but I was very much on the roller coaster. I share this with you because I want you all to know that I have absolutely been there. My anxiety used to consume me. I was constantly ruminating and replaying things in my brain. It's totally normal for old patterns to come up at deeper and deeper levels of your work. Just because I am much more aware of my thoughts and feelings doesn't mean that the same patterns don't come up for me during the IVF cycles or in my business. We all experience anxiety around uncertainty. So what is uncertainty? It's literally not being certain, not being sure. I think for our brains, the really scary part of uncertainty is not knowing what will happen in the future, the fear of the future. I think intellectually, we all know that uncertainty is a part of the moment-to-moment human experience. The only certainty we have is that we are currently alive and sometime we will die. That's it. Uncertainty is a natural state of life and existence, and yet we fight like hell against it. Why? Because to our primitive brains, uncertainty means that we could die at any moment, which, is technically true. But our brains have evolved to avoid death at all costs, to avoid danger at all costs. Ergo, we are terrified of uncertainty and do all that we can to avoid it. I think one of the primary ways we try to avoid uncertainty is that we make up stories in our brains about how things will be so that we can pretend we know what's coming. Think about how much time you spend thinking about the future or worrying that what will come and trying to prepare for it. And all of that is because you fear the uncertainty, the unknown. Here's the kicker. We are so afraid of uncertainty that we would rather make ourselves miserable now with our worries and forecasting and fretting just so we can think we are prepared to be miserable in the future. I mean, come on, brains. We try to control everything, our bodies, how we look, what other people think of us. Think of people pleasing. We try to control the environment. We try to control friends and family, all the things. All because we fear the unknown, the uncertainty. But I'm not going to stop there because this is the most important part that we really don't think about. What we actually fear is not the thing that might happen, right? The situation or circumstance. Circumstances never cause our feelings. A circumstance happens and then we have a thought about it. That's how it works. So a circumstance is not what we're fearing. What we fear is what we might think and feel in the future. We are terrified of uncertainty because we are uncertain about how we will think and feel in the future. And because we're not taught about our thoughts and feelings, and we believe thoughts and feelings just happen to us, that our experience of life comes from the outside. So the idea of this feels out of control, and so we fear not knowing what we will feel and why. I mean, if you think about it, we're afraid of our own minds and our own bodies. We are afraid of the thoughts we might have and the sensations that we might feel. I'm going to say that one more time because I think it's really important to understand. We are not afraid of the thing happening, whatever it is. We are afraid of how we will think about what happened and how we will feel about what happened. So we're afraid of uncertainty because we don't know when or if those things are going to happen. Yet nothing in our lives are certain. Our jobs are not certain. Our relationships are not certain. Our health is not certain. None of it is certain. Getting comfortable with the discomfort of uncertainty is how we break through that anxiety and how we manage uncertainty. I'm sure you are hoping for strategies to create more certainty. I get it. But the key is to stop buying into the illusion of certainty that many of us have created. This illusion that we buy into so wholeheartedly, and yet we still don't feel any better. We fight so hard to cling to this illusion and end up feeling terrible because we're trying to control things that are uncontrollable. Uncertainty is an emotion, and the first step with any emotion is to allow it to be there. So many of us, myself included, don't like to feel uncomfortable. So when we experience an uncomfortable emotion, we try to solve for it immediately. But emotions are not a problem to be solved. They are a thing. They are an experience to have. If we try to force ourselves to let go of an uncomfortable emotion, number one, that shit don't work at all. And number two, usually what happens is when we can't get to a more comfortable emotion, we shame ourselves for quote unquote not doing it right. We don't need that extra layer of garbage in our life, so we start with processing the emotion that we are currently experiencing. Now, it's the now process for allowing emotions. I go through it in detail during the Feel Better Now podcast episode, so check that out if you want more information. But the first step is to notice and name the emotion. A lot of us will probably name it anxiety, which isn't wrong. It's a facet of anxiety. If you're swarming around with a bunch of I don't knows or what ifs, that might be a really good indicator that uncertainty is underneath that anxiety. Second step is to open up to it. That's the O part. You don't have to act like uncertainty is your best friend, but you also don't have to treat it like a pariah or a leper or something. We can just sit with it and let the emotion be there. And the third step is to witness the emotion, which is to describe it to yourself, what the emotion feels like in your body. I would strongly encourage you to close your eyes while you're doing this, because if you have your eyes open and you're trying to describe it, you're going to be describing it from your brain, not actually what's happening inside your body. Let me give you 2 examples. So number 1, it feels like I'm never going to take a deep breath. This is a thought about your feeling. This is when you are relying on your brain to answer a question about your body. Or number 2, there's a heavy weighted blanket of bricks on my chest. That is someone who has dropped into their body and can describe what is happening. Do you see the difference? When you drop into your body to feel your emotions, you can describe it. Your brain is not invited to the party. You can't outthink an emotion and you can't outact an emotion. Your emotions are vibrations in your body that need to be felt. Even with someone who self-coaches daily, like myself, I still feel the discomfort of uncertainty. If the nature of life is uncertain and the brain detests uncertainty, then it's a really good bet that even with a managed mind, sometimes you're going to experience discomfort or anxiety around uncertainty. It only becomes a problem when we believe we should never have to feel this way. It's only a problem if we believe that we are entitled to not have to feel this way. This IVF or IUI process, this journey is very uncertain. We do the things, we take the supplements, we do what our doctor says, we inject the meds, we do all the things, and yet the outcome is completely uncertain. It's kind of a fantasy to tell yourself that getting pregnant or having a baby will eliminate uncertainty from your life. The uncertainty will just change and morph into another area of your life because that's what it's supposed to do. So when I am experiencing anxiety related to uncertainty, I will remind myself that this is how I'm supposed to feel. This helps me a lot with the O part of now, the open up to it. I'm not telling myself that I shouldn't feel this way, which is what a lot of us do. Once you've allowed for and processed that emotion, then you can start digging into what is really causing it, which is always your thoughts. I mentioned it before, but I think it bears repeating. We're never really afraid of the thing that's happening or might happen. We're always afraid of how we will think and feel. For so many of my clients, they fear what they will think and feel about themselves, that they're losers or failures or something like that. Whatever mean thought you can think of. Some are overt mean thoughts, like I'm a piece of shit or I'm too selfish to have a kid. Some are a little bit more insidious, like I jinxed myself when whatever. That's like a sneaky little thought that says, I'm to blame for this thing that happened. I think a lot of us use that kind of sneaky language, but it's still a way to blame ourselves for something we had no control over. This was one that came to me after our first failed transfer. The time leading up to the transfer and while we were in our 9-day wait for the blood test, I kept feeling like something was off. I would push past that thought because I was so hopeful that it would work. Then we got the news and I remember thinking, see, I knew something was wrong and I should have trusted my gut. That thought plagued me for weeks. It took several coaching sessions to root it out too because it was so deeply ingrained. I blamed myself. I genuinely blamed myself. And this was my brain's backdoor sneaky way of reinforcing that blame. I've come to realize that I think I needed to know what was going to happen, that it was vitally important for me to know the outcome, or at least that's what my brain told me, because if I guessed wrong, then I was going to blame myself. Or another one that you've had an idea to do or try something. Maybe it was a test you wanted to ask your doctor about, doing acupuncture, or hell, even during an exam in high school, and you had a thought, but you didn't follow it, only to find out that the first thought was actually right. Then you get the crap prize of shaming yourself and beating yourself up for not trusting yourself. You tell yourself, I should have trusted myself, which kind of sounds like a nice thought, but it's like pretty poison. So many of us struggle with trusting our bodies. Women are socialized to distrust their bodies. We follow diets that tell us to eat when we're not hungry and to avoid eating even though we're about to pass out. Then we go through infertility and we feel like we're at constant war with our bodies because we blame our bodies for miscarriages, failed cycles, failed transfers, or just infertility in general. Almost as if our bodies are outside of us because we are not connected to them. Because what we are not connected to is very easy to blame. So we already distrust our bodies. We are constantly blaming, shaming, and judging ourselves. And we think that we're collecting evidence in our brains for what our bodies need to be shamed, blamed, and judged for. But all of the evidence is really just our thoughts. Then when another opportunity presents itself to judge, blame, and shame, we continue to quote unquote build evidence. Then we go back and analyze and reanalyze our so-called evidence. So while I was self-coaching on the failed transfer, and when I'm confronted with uncertainty, like right now, right before our next transfer, I want to get out of the back and forth, the push and pull. I had to really question the idea that it would be better for me to know the outcome ahead of time. And I think that's the idea that underlines so much of this process. I think that's why we have the pee on a stick addicts that we have. Full disclosure, I'm not one, but if that's you, boo, you do you. But the question I kept coming back to is, why do I need to know the outcome ahead of time? The only reason that I would need to know the outcome ahead of time is if I was going to leave myself at the mercy of my unmanaged mind. If I know that I can feel any emotion, that I have agency over my thoughts, and I can choose how I want to feel and think in any situation, then I don't have to try to avoid a particular outcome. I don't have to try to control the things in an effort to manipulate things to help me feel better. In preparation for our final transfer, I'm allowing myself to really go down the happy path and what I will think and do, but also the scary path and what I'll think and do then. I call it equal airtime. I'm giving myself several thoughts that create comfort and safety within myself, should we not get the outcome we hope for. Thoughts like, I know how to take care of myself no matter what happens. It is okay to grieve right now. I am sad and I am capable of feeling sadness. Notice that there is no sweet, pretty daisies and unicorns with rainbows coming out of their asses thoughts. Just an acknowledgement of what I could be thinking and feeling. That if we don't get the outcome we hope for, it doesn't mean that there is anything fundamentally wrong with me. It doesn't mean I have to turn on myself, which when you do, makes the grieving process infinitely more painful when you add dirty pain into the mix. And I think it's so important to know, I can choose to feel an uncomfortable emotion if we do not get the outcome we hope for. And yes, I said choose, because I always get to choose how I think and feel. If our transfer doesn't work, or if there's a miscarriage, I will choose to feel sadness and grief. I want to feel sadness and grief over that. And because I am reminding myself of that now, I don't have to fear that they're going to happen to me. I'm not willing them into existence. That's not how that works. But I am creating safety within myself should that come to pass. I will know I can handle it. It stops being something I fear because it's not something that is going to happen to me against my will. That's the little places, these little moments where we get to choose our power. We get to choose. I get to choose ahead of time without knowing the outcome that I have taken complete ownership of the one and only thing I have control over at that moment, myself. And that is what I wish for all of you too. So this is what I have for you today, my beautiful friends. I will talk to you soon. Have a great week. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.